Alright, we are back, number 51. Which of the following helps explain why the demand curve for normal goods is downward sloping? Alright, so let's make sure we go over a couple of the terms that we're going to need before we start. But in general, the reason why the demand curve is downward sloping, we've seen before, is the marginal utility. So that if you have one cookie, at a certain price up here, and by the time you get to the 100th cookie, it doesn't have that much utility for you. The marginal utility is much lower, so you'd want to get it at a much lower price. So because of marginal utility decreasing also explains why a demand curve would be downward sloping. A second reason would be something called the income effect. So what the income effect says is that if you're enjoying a good at this price and you're buying this much of the good, some quantity over here, and the price goes down. So the price goes down to a lower price. At this point, what happens is the price that you were paying goes down. So what's left in your income is actually more, right? So if this item was costing you $3 and your income was $10, you'd have $7 left. But if it goes from $3 down to $1, now you have $9 left. So you have more income. Now what happens when you have more income? When you have more income, you know what? You might spend it and you might buy more, right? So you can see if you buy more at the lower price, again, that enforces the downward sloping demand curve. So that would be the income effect, which also, as we said, makes the demand curve downward slope. And finally, the last one that reinforces the demand curve is the substitution effect. So what happens in the substitution effect is, let's take an example that you eat 3 days a week at Panera Bread, and it costs you this price, and you eat this 3 times a week also at Noodles and Company, and that's also the same price. Let's just say they're the same price. So if Panera Bread starts offering a lower price, right, then you may not go to Noodles and Company because you get it at a lower price at Panera Bread. So you might go to Panera Bread 4 or 5 times a week. So when the price goes down, because of the substitution effect, you're going to actually be using the Panera Bread more, right? So essentially, as prices go down, you'll substitute into the cheaper good as a substitute to use more of it. And that's another reason why the demand curve goes down. Okay, so let's just take a look at the choices. A, the income and substitution effects move the quantity demanded in the same direction. And that's what we just explained. That's exactly right. Let's take a look at the other choices. The income effect moves the quantity demanded in the opposite direction of the substitution effect. And that's not true. They move in the same direction, and they both have the direction that lowers or makes the demand curve downward slope. The income effect dominates the substitution effect. We don't know anything about them dominating. They appear to both work together. I don't know if one's much stronger than the other. The substitution effect dominates the income effect. Again, they both have the similar effects. And finally, E, with an increase in income, the consumer decreases consumption of the good. And that's exactly wrong. We would expect the consumer to be increasing his consumption as his income increased. So that's not right. So the choice here is A. All right, number 52 gives you a nice chart. The graph above shows the total revenue and the total cost curves for a firm in which type of market structure and what is the profit maximizing quantity. So they want to know the market structure and the profit maximizing quantity. So let's take a look at the market maximizing quantity first. So what does it mean to maximize your profits? So if you subtracted your revenue from your cost, that would give you your profits. So here, cost and revenue is the same thing, so there's no profits here. Here, this amount would signal your profit, so there's a substantial profit here because the revenue is much higher than the cost. Again, here at Q2, the total cost and total revenue are the same, so there's no profit. And then here at Q1, the cost is actually higher than the revenue, so this is a loss. So profit is maximized right here at Q3. And now the question becomes, is this a monopoly graph or is it a perfect competition graph? So the way to figure this out is to understand the demand curve for perfect competition. If you remember, the demand curve is exactly flat in perfect competition. So as you buy more and more and more, that means your revenue goes up linearly, right? So If you have one piece at $1, it's $1. If you have two pieces at $1, it's $2. If you have 10 pieces at $1, it's $10. And that would make a linear revenue curve. And you expect to see a total revenue curve that looks something like this, nice and linear. Now remember, with a monopoly or even monopolistic competition, you will see a downward sloping demand curve. So that means that they'll sell a certain quantity at one price, but if they want to sell more, they have to have a lower price, right? So the revenue curve for doing this is not necessarily going to be linear. In fact, you might find a marginal revenue curve that kind of tends down like that. So looking at this graph, we could take a look at the total revenue curve. We see that it's exactly linear. We'd expect that from a horizontal demand curve, which we see in perfect competition. So from the revenue curve, we know that it's perfect competition, which is one of these, and we know that the maximizing the profit is Q3, which looks like this one. So the answer here is D. Alright, number 53. If total revenue is increasing, as output increases, marginal revenue is always. So essentially, if you sell more, you make more, which means that the marginal revenue is always going to have to be some positive number. Otherwise, if it was negative, the marginal revenue, then you sell more and the total revenue would actually go down. But we know it's not negative. It's got to be positive. So as total revenue is increasing, as output increases, marginal revenue always has to be some positive number. So let's take a look at the choices. Marginal revenue is equal to average revenue. Well, we certainly don't know that for sure. Less than the average revenue, we don't know that either. Marginal revenue is increasing. Well, it doesn't have to be increasing. It could be increasing, or it could be decreasing. All we know is that yes, it is greater than 0. That is what we know from the conditions given. So here the correct answer is E. Alright, number 54. Let P equal price, MR equal marginal revenue, MC equals marginal cost, and AT is average total cost. In monopolistic competition, which of the following most accurately describes the long-run equilibrium conditions for a firm? Okay, so I mean, we've seen monopoly and we've seen perfect competition. Now we have something called monopolistic competition. So in a perfect competition, remember, we don't really see a demand curve. The demand curve is horizontal because there's so many people in the industry that you can't really affect the demand of it, because the price you're a price taker, not a price maker. And in monopoly, and also in monopolistic competition, you will see a demand curve where your output is going to affect how much people will buy. So what is the difference between monopolistic competition and monopoly? See, in a monopolistic competition, remember, there's competition. So they're going to squeeze out profits in the long run. Whereas in a monopoly, they don't necessarily squeeze out all the profits. Okay, so just taking a look at the answers, it looks like they're trying to compare the price to average total cost, marginal revenue to marginal cost, and price to marginal cost. In all forms of profit maximizing marketplaces, you always want to set the marginal revenue equal to the marginal cost. So we have 3 answers that fit that bill. Okay, now because there's competition in the long run, we're expecting that you cannot make any additional money. So the price is going to be equal to the average total cost. So that's the fixed cost plus the variable cost is going to equal the price, because if there was competition, they would come in and squeeze out any profit there'd be, leaving you with your price equal to the average total cost. So these are the choices that fit that scenario. Okay, so we're only left with these 2 alternatives, both C and D, and they're asking you, or the difference is either the price is greater than the marginal cost or the price is equal to the marginal cost. So now, if the price was equal to the marginal cost, that would mean you're only getting money to cover your variable cost and not your fixed cost. So you would never stay in business that way, and they are in business, so this cannot be a correct answer. The price is greater than the marginal cost. That's right, because you need enough to cover your fixed costs, right? And that's what makes this one, C, the correct answer. Okay, 55. In perfectly competitive free market economy, a wage gap between 2 workers can be explained by differences in all of the following except. All right, so why would you pay two workers more? Years of schooling, yes. If somebody has more schooling, you'd expect them to be more productive, so that does explain it, so it's not an exception. Occupations, yes, you might want to pay somebody who's working on a computer more than somebody who's putting labels on a box, so that is also, I'm putting a check here. It's a check that it works, but you're looking for the except, so it's not the right answer. Marginal products, so this means that if one person could produce 10 shoes an hour, another person could do 100, obviously you're going to pay the guy who does 100 more, so that's also true. It's not an exception. And then we have this new term, marginal revenue products, and this is how much money somebody makes, how much revenue or sales you get for producing the product, which is actually better than marginal products, because if somebody is making um, a shoe, but the other person is making a computer, and you can sell computers for more than shoes, then they'd actually be more valuable. So this is another good way to explain why workers would be paid more. And then finally have tastes for luxury goods, and that really has very little to do with how much you're paying your worker in your factory or in your service, unless maybe you're a columnist for the food and wines at the New York Times or something. But that is not the best way compared to the other ones for explaining a disparity in two workers' pay. So the correct answer here is E.